Well, backed by Rakesh Jhunjhunwala RARE Enterprises, Concord Biotech, based in Ahmedabad, is set for its initial public offering on August 4th. The pharma company aims to raise sum of around 1,551 crore by offering in 2.09 crore equity shares, accounting for almost 20% of the paid-up equity at the upper price band. This issue is solely consists of an offer for sale by Helix Investment Holdings, and the offer price ranges from 705 to 741 per share. To know more about the company, we're being joined by Ankur Vaid, Joint Managing Director and the CEO of the company, along with the CFO of the company as well, Mr. Lalit Sethi. Afternoon there, gentlemen. First question, of course, would be since the IPO is completely an OFS, I'd want to understand why is Helix Investment exiting, that's the rationale behind the same, and how would the proceeds be utilized for?
Basically, Helix Investments has invested into this company in 2016. And as per the private equity norms, they normally have the fund life around 5 to 6 years, which is over by now. So that's the reason that they are exiting from this company. And as far as the proceeds of this issue is concerned, these are complete OFS, as you have rightly mentioned. So the whole of the proceeds will be going to the selling shareholders.
All right. Also, I'd want to understand if what are the key entry barriers for fermentation-based pharma companies? Could you highlight some of them?
Sure. So I think fermentation has significant barriers to entry, because of which you see very, very limited competition in this space. And some of these entry barriers are that A, it is a very complex and a challenging process, which involves working with living microorganisms and then ensuring that you consistently manufacture the desired product with the desired productivity. So a lot of technical expertise is required in this field. Also, it is highly capital intensive in nature, as large scale manufacturing capacities are required. And thirdly, that strong R&D expertise are required to commercialize the products, right from strain improvement, media optimization, and then developing a robust downstream recovery process. So these are significant entry barriers because of which you see very, very limited competition in this space.
Sure. Let's also understand the long-term plans for injectables and CDMO projects. Is the company also looking to diversify more into injectables? If yes, could you guys detail it for the viewers out there?
Sure. So I think some of the growth levers that we have for future, CDMO and injectable is one of those such growth levers. And historically we have undertaken CDMO projects, but they've been mostly on the development side, where we have worked with some of the global multinationals in the development of fermentation products at the new chemical entity stage. But because of certain limitations on the capacity, we did take contract manufacturing projects. But now, just last year, we have set up a new plant wherein we have put up 800 meter cube of fermentation capacity vis-a-vis the 450 meter cube that we have at Unit 1. So basically increased our fermentation capacity by 3-fold. And this CDMO business is one such opportunity that we are looking at. And given the fact that now companies are looking at China plus one strategy, and also the fact that Europe is also becoming expensive because of the macroeconomic conditions due to the Russia-Ukraine war. So in order to de-risk, India is definitely a preferred choice. And within that, Concord, being an expert in fermentation, becomes the partner of choice for such products. So CDMO is definitely a business area, focus area for us. And so is the case of injectables, because as we would see that very few players are operating in this segment. And Concord intends to be fully integrated from the API to the finished injectable space as well.
Sure. And any further plans of diversifying within that space?
So basically, in last 3 or 4 years, we have built up significant capacities with respect to API manufacturing, as has been said about the 800 meter cube of the capacity at Nimbasi plant. And another injectable plant is also going under progress and will be commissioned by the end of December. So the coming years are going to be used for consolidations of all these capacities which have been built in last couple of years.
Sure. Let's understand about the dependence, if at all, on China for raw material. What are the company's plans to curtail that?
So, because of certain constraints that we had at our facility, we had qualified uh, some suppliers for one of the starting material, which we were manufacturing in-house as well as importing from China. But given that now we have the new capacity and sufficient capacity in place, our dependency on China has been gradually coming down. And going forward, we expect it to be brought down further, but in case, whether we want to bring it down to zero, the answer is yes. We have the capacities and capabilities to bring it down to nil dependency on China.
So, when you say you can bring it down to zero, when is that achievable? Which year?
So it is. So this is again a more of a make or a buy decision, because we would want to utilize our capacities for some of the final APIs rather than using it on the starting material. However, if till the time we have spare capacity to make such starting materials, we would give that the preference to do in-house rather than importing it from China. So it is more of a make or a buy decision that we would go by on a case-to-case basis.
But any plans that you can, probably lay out in this financial year? What's the number, the percentage out there that we are sourcing from China, the company is sourcing from China, and how much does it intend to reduce it in this financial year, that's FY24?
We have not set any specific targets as such, because, as I said, it is depending upon the requirements and how we are at that time point. But it is a gradual process that we would be working towards. I may not be able to share the numbers at this point of time.
How much does the number stand currently in FY23? How much did you source from China in terms of raw material? Could you put out a percentage there?
It was 32%.
All right. Also, I'd want to understand what is the operating margin difference between API and the formulation segment, which is more attractive at this point of time?
At this point of time, if you ask me that, since the API business is a very, very niche kind of a product which has been discussed, which involves lots of technical complexities, lot of capital investments, lesser competitions, and very, very niche kind of an area wherein we are operating. The EBITDA margins or the profitability margins are relatively higher in API business as compared to the formulation business, where there are more competition, more players who are working with in the formulations.
And what's the percent difference out there?
It will be very difficult to pinpoint how much will be the difference, but yes, it's relatively better in API as compared to the formulation.
All right. The company also seems to be benefited from the entire backward integration of APIs. Which market is the company now manufacturing formulations for, and are they all backward integrated?
Yes, so we are present in the US, emerging markets, as well as in India. When we talk about emerging markets, we are present in Southeast Asia, Latin America, Middle East, Africa region. So we have done our filings across the globe and are selling our products to global markets. For most of the molecules that we initiate when we started formulation were backwardly integrated products, but going forward, we are also looking at sourcing APIs from third parties, and the formulation business would be something that would be growing on a standalone basis and not fully supported by the backward integrations.
All right. Would you explain the expertise that the company enjoys overall in the fermentation based APIs? How is it different from the regular APIs, and the revenue share from this segment?
So the revenue split from fermentation to formulation is that 80% of our business comes through the API and 20% of that comes from the formulation business. Maybe talking about the capabilities that Concord has compared to the peers, we have one of the widest portfolio of fermentation APIs when compared to the peers. Across different therapeutic segments such as the immunosuppressants, oncology, anti-infectives, antifungal, and we have the necessary economies of scale, which is 1250 meter cube of fermentation capacity, which is significantly larger to handle such kind of products. global regulatory approvals from agencies such as US, Europe, Japan, Korea, and others, and a very flexible plant configuration we have. So all these combined with the entry barriers helps us ensure that we have this leadership position.
Sure, understand that point. Well taken. Overall, if you look at the environment, API companies overall have faced a very volatile environment because of the higher input cost pressures during COVID, along with the higher inventory, which is a trend which has played out for the industry. What's the status there now?
So if you see, fermentation is a different segment altogether, because for us, the starting material is the basic carbon, nitrogen, and other mineral elements which are readily available in India in the form of products like dextrose, maltose, concentrate powder, which are locally sourced from India. So the impact of COVID was not as significant on fermentation as one would have seen on some of the other chemical APIs, where much of the intermediates were actually being sourced from different parts of the world, including China, where there was a pricing pressure.
Okay, speaking of the pressures and the margins back to that profile, almost at 40% in FY23, roughly around that level in FY22. Was more than 50% in FY21. So you can see a wide fluctuations per se, which is percolating down. Is this due to input cost? A, and what is the steady state one can expect going forward?
No, it was not basically the input cost in that way, that perspective. In financial year 2021, these were 53% because due to the COVID, there was certain restrictions on the movement. There was a lockdown in most of the places. So the expenses were rationalized at that period. That period was a period when there was so much of restrictions on the activities. So as a result, our EBITDA margin was 53%. In financial year 2022, our Limbasi facility was just commissioned, and the overhead expenses were expensed out in the particular year, which was the reason that it came down to 38%. In 2023, the most of the capacity utilization for the unit 3 was ramped up, became regular, and the most of the things became more sustainable. That's what is our margin in financial year 2023. So if you look at the history, if you look at the current situation, the sustainable margin which we can talk about would be in the range of around 40 to 42%.
All right, so 42% is what seems to be sustainable. But does this also factor in the China +1 factor, as the company benefited from that?
Not really, because as I mentioned, that we do not see much competition from China in the segment that we operate in. Not many players are there from China which are in this segment. So because of which, we do not really see any impact on the China +1 strategy. But I think where it will play out is in the CDMO business that we spoke about, because companies would look from a de-risking perspective. They have gone to China looking at larger capacities at competitive pricing. But now, if from a de-risking perspective and looking the fact that players like Concord has built such capacities and has expertise with global approvals, this is one possibility that we see that could play out in the medium-term perspective for us.
All right. Speaking about is the company looking to enter overall in the US market with the formulation? What is the market share there, types of drugs that the company has filed for?
So we currently have around 4 ANDAs in the US, and we are present in the US through our marketing partner there. We look at opportunities to grow within the US, and whenever there are such opportunities, we kind of try to address those by gaining our market share there.
All right. Let's talk about the strategy that the company has overall, the business model in India. API supplies, formulation as a % of sales. Does the company plan to increase the domestic market share? What's the share currently? And say for the next 2 years, say by FY25, what's the company's aim out there?
So, maybe take it from both the perspectives, the API and formulation. So, we are selling our APIs, 50% of our sales goes to domestic markets. And, we are catering to all the major players in India, all the major formulation players, for their API requirements in these segments. And working with all the leading companies here. Of course, the end market could be the global markets, because when we talk about many of these players, they are catering to the global markets there as well. And we are also having a very strong presence in India. We continue to build our API market in India because, one of the things that we are working very closely with the Indian government also is towards making India Atmanirbhar. And there are quite a few molecules that we have launched within that space. Amphotericin B was one such molecule that during COVID times, we kind of launched this product to cater to the requirements of the Indian patients. So a lot of work is going towards reducing the dependency on fermentation APIs from other parts of the world. So definitely this is this is a very focused area for us. In terms of formulation, we have presence in India in the transplant segment as well as in the critical care range of products. So we have a field force of close to around 180 people who are working pan-India operations and catering to both the corporate hospitals as well as the government institutions under the Concord Biotech's label.
Mr. Vaid and Mr. Sethi, last final question that I have is the company is backed by Quadria Capital Fund along with RARE Enterprises, which is a Jhunjhunwala-based company. I'd want to understand if there is a lock-in period for these two companies or funds for that matter. What's the strategic plan? How do they look at the industry? If you could provide us with more details on this one.
In fact, after the IPO is been done, there will be definitely a lock-in period for the existing shareholder, which will apply to the RARE Enterprises as well, because they are also not participating in as a selling shareholder in these transactions. So this will be applicable for all the existing shareholders who will be there at this point of time.
What's the lock-in period for them here?
It will be 6 months.
6 months after the IPO. And when have they invested?
In fact, Quadria invested, as I mentioned, in 2016, and RARE Enterprises invested in 2004.
All right. So for both of them, the lock-in period stays at 6 months, right? After the IPO.
Really. Not really, because the Helix will be the selling shareholder, so they will be selling.
Right.
So there will not be any lock-in period for the selling shareholder. But after
not the selling shareholder, sir. I'm talking about the Quadria Capital Fund and RARE Enterprises. You said the lock-in period for both of them would be 6 months post-listing. Have I got that right?
Not really, because the Quadria is selling the shares.
Right. And how about RARE Enterprises?
RARE Enterprises will continue as a shareholder, so the lock-in period will be applicable to the RARE Enterprises.
And which is for how much? What period?
It will be for 6 months' time.
All right, that's exactly what I was trying to get at. RARE Enterprises probably just 6 months after the listing. All right, we're just going to leave it at that. Thank you so much for taking out the time, gentlemen, and speaking to us.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure talking.
All right, wish you all the luck for the IPO. Indeed, it's a RARE Enterprises-based IPO company, and the lock-in period is for 6 months post-listing. It's a little different business as compared to the API formulations. It's got an upper edge as compared to the peers. The prospects are laid out in front of you. But with this, it's a wrap and goodbye from the entire team who puts this piece together for you. Thank you so much for tuning in.